Live from Salt Lake City, this is Heart of the Matter, where we do all we can to worship God in spirit and truth. I'm your host, Shawn McCraney, and I'm very excited tonight to introduce our pre-recorded guest, Dr. Larry Norris. He is a pastor with the United Methodist Church. Now listen, you know, I have had to have run-ins, and I thought this was the norm for Christianity growing up for the past, almost 20 years in it, that everybody is just, this is the way it is, and you must do it this way, and you must think this way. And I haven't had the opportunity to meet people who kind of are a little bit like me, and, who kind of see people with a little bit more compassion and a little bit less dogma. And that is what I found in our interview with Dr. Larry Norris, and I'm so excited for you to watch it because I get to actually sit on a stage with a man who knows his stuff and has been around the block. Wait till you hear his story. But he also has a real deep love, not only for Jesus, but for people. And it comes out, and I think he embodies Christianity so well. And so I'm really honored to have him. But before we do it, I want to tell you a couple things. Next week, I've spoke with Sam Young, and Sam is going to be on the show to give us an update on how his fast is going, and his inviting LDS apostles to come and sit with him. And so he's going to join us next Tuesday night at the opening of the show. And then our guest is going to be Marty Steinberg. He is a confirmed atheist, and he really has a distaste for the evangelical right and some real heartburn with what he calls reward-punishment methodologies that organized religions use. And Marty's been around the block, and so he will be our atheist guest next week. And hopefully we're going to be able to break down some barriers and talk with each other. The following week, on August 21st, we're having Dan Ellis, who is the secretary of the Atheists of Utah organization. He's also a co-host of Godless Revolution. Why do people say revolution now? How come no one says revolution? They write revolution everywhere. Someone explain that to me later. My daughters probably will. But he's part of the Godless Revolution podcast, and he'll be joining us on August 21st. And he's a hard, fast atheist. And so we're going to have two atheists in a row. And then finally on August 28th, we're going to have Professor Claire Peterson, Professor of Humanities here in Salt Lake City, a former LDS. And from what I know, talking about Claire, religion doesn't seem to matter much to her anymore. I'm not sure what her views are on God and things. She's a mother and etc. But now former LDS, a smart woman. So we're going to have three unique guests who aren't really religious after we have Dr. Larry Norris, who you're going to see right now. You can't believe how hot it is. Look at this. No, I'm just kidding. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited for our program tonight. And as you know, we have gone through and had different representatives from different denominations of Christianity. We've had more Calvinists, more Presbyterians than I've really wanted over the years. And then we've had a Catholic priest recently. We have a Church of the Brethren coming up. We have an Amish pastor coming up. And we have a few other denominations. But right now, we have someone who's not just a reverend pastor. He is the dad of one of our congregates here at campus, Larry Norris, we did a show with him a little while ago. And Larry has a phenomenal story, but behind that story are the parents. And that will come out in a minute. But first, let me introduce to you Dr. Reverend Pastor Larry Norris Sr.
Thank you, Shawn.
Thanks for being on with us.
Wonderful to be here. Wonderful to be here.
Yesterday we were able to have some dinner together and got to know you a little better and heard about your background, which I think is really important for our audience because it's going to help kind of set a foundation of where you are presently. And then if we can talk just for 15 minutes after we learn about where you came from, so you can teach us about the Methodist Church. I want to know some of the key things about the Methodist religion and then how close you are with it. And do you veer from it? Things like that. And then we want to talk about that youngest son of yours, Larry Norris.
Okay.
And you guys at home, that is the story. This is the real lesson here. You're going to hear some great lessons, but this is the real lesson. Is the parenting of a Christian man and his wife of their son through something that most Christian parents fail in, at least in my experience. So we'll talk about that. But tell us about yourself.
All right. I was a product of parents who spent their lives in the Air Force. And I was born in 1944, and I have a twin brother. And later on, I would have another brother many years later named Jeff. My twin brother's Terry, and we grew up in the Air Force. And over the years, we lived all over the country. We lived in California and Florida and Texas and Illinois and of course Michigan. And so early years, I never spent very long in one particular school. We were moving every year and a half to two years.
Wow.
Yeah. And then as time went on and as we grew, we eventually settled in Florida, where my dad was stationed at Homestead Air Force Base. And he was in the business of being a navigator in B-47 jet bombers. And he lost his life in a tragic accident over the Isle of Pines in Cuba. And after that time, my brothers and myself and my mother, we went back to Michigan, because that's kind of where the home base was.
How old were you when you lost your dad?
12 years old.
Wow.
12 years of age, which is a tough time to lose a parent. Yeah.
Wow.
And so we went back, and I remember taking several years to really deal with the loss and the grief. It was very hard for me personally. And I have to tell you that my mother, it was hard for her to cope with that and deal with that. In some ways, I don't know if she ever really got over that her whole life, that loss. She managed to move on, but I think it was really a struggle at times. The saving grace in a lot of that transition through those years of going into junior high and high school was the church. Because at that time, my mother and my grandparents belonged to the Wesleyan Methodist Church. And so during those years of being a teenager, we attended the Wesleyan Methodist Church. I can't tell you my heart was in it, and I can't tell you I loved getting up and going to Sunday school, because that really wasn't the case. But with grandparents that said basically, you're going to go, and a mother that said, you're going to go, we were there. And so the church and my grandparents were just remarkable people during that whole time of transition. They were great. I can truly say they were great Christian people.
Wow.
My grandmother played the organ in the church, was devoutly spiritual. My grandfather taught Bible classes in the church and was on various committees. But the Wesleyan Methodist Church taught basically the importance of having an experience of Christ in your life. The church that I grew up in, it was not a hard sell, but people encouraged it. And there were altar calls, actually altar calls. And
wow.
I can remember being encouraged a few times to go to the altar call.
Did you go up?
I did on a couple occasions.
Did it work?
Exactly. I just thought I'd better do that. Keep everybody happy.
Yeah, exactly. You played it well.
The real experience would come later.
Right. That is so important.
I was being programmed in understanding something about basic Wesleyan theology at that time. Because even though I'd eventually become a United Methodist pastor in the United Methodist Church, a lot of the same beliefs were the same. They came out of that very rich Wesleyan well of teaching about of grace and love and the love of God. It's the Arminian view, as you would understand. So as time went on, and we went through junior high school and high school, and eventually decided to go to Michigan State University.
Hold on 1 second. I forgot this. I
Okay.
forgot this.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. All right. Did you bring my hat, Deb?
She didn't.
No, she didn't. I'm sitting here with no green and white, and here I've got the blue and gold I've got to look at.
At dinner last night, he showed his visible. He's a great man of God, but there was a disdain in his face for Michigan. This is where our youngest daughter attends graduate school. So out of respect, I am going to remove it. But let me tell you something. When these cameras are off, I'm putting it right back on. All right.
Very good. Very good. And I will not say the name Michigan. Okay.
Okay.
It's in Wolverines.
Yes.
For the rest of this time. All right. I guess we can continue
Yes.
now. We got that barrier out of the way.
It's like denominationalism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right. So time passed, but I had a remarkable experience. After my senior year in high school, I went to a summer camp in Michigan, and the camp was called Barakel, and it's actually, I believe, a Hebrew word that means where God has blessed, and it was a Baptist camp, and I had a remarkable experience at that camp of inviting Christ into my life. This was the real deal.
Yeah.
And I'd been going to church for years. I understood the essential message, but this was an event where I decided I took seriously what was happening with my faith.
How old were you?
I was 17.
Wow.
17, yeah. And so then, from that point on, I went to Michigan State University and actually looked at a number of options. I believe, if I recall, I was pre-med for a while, and looked at law, and then just felt like the call of God in my life to go into ministry was a focused reality for me. And as you know, there's that old expression that says, if you can do anything else, don't go into ministry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but that was the only place I saw myself moving.
That's
So-
definitely a call from God, isn't it?
It was for me.
Yeah.
I know calls come in different ways to people, and they experience, Christ in different ways. But that was certainly real for me, and the call was real. And that experience at that camp, and what happened in my life has been just a grounding for me my whole life when things got really difficult. I go back and I remember that, and it's been helpful through good times as well as difficult times.
Sure.
So I went to Michigan State, then I went to Asbury Theological Seminary, which is an evangelical seminary in Wilmore, Kentucky. And even though it was a evangelical seminary, there were people there from all different denominations, and probably 60% of the young people studying there were people going into United Methodist ministry, or Free Methodist, or Wesleyan Methodist. It was definitely a Wesleyan-centered theological seminary.
Can you, I'm putting you on the spot, just explain for us what the differences are between those three main approaches to the Methodist?
Yeah. In a nutshell, the Wesleyan Methodist, the Free Methodist, the Methodist Church, and the United Methodist Church all came out of the same Wesleyan teachings. The Free Methodist Church and the Wesleyan Methodist Church split in the 19th century from the broader Methodist group over the issue of slavery.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were opposed to slavery in the strongest way, and so the Free Methodists and the Wesleyan Methodists split primarily over that issue, but there were also issues that focused on polity and discipline, church government. They were far more decentralized than the Methodist Church, which is really essentially an Episcopal framework. It moves from the top down. And of course, John Wesley came out of the Anglican Church. He was Church of England.
Yeah.
He never wanted to leave it. He never did, and he never did. And so the Methodist Church started because of his work and his efforts, but it was all because of his devotion to the Anglican Church, and that's, or the Church of England, and that's why today, if you go to many United Methodist churches, you will find considerable liturgy that still has tinges of High Church even, and has tinges of Church of England kinds of things.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And the Methodist Church also continued on, but it split into several African American groups in the later 18th century and through the 19th century. And actually, the Methodist Church was the key core of Methodism in the United States. And then in 1969, the Methodist Church and the Evangelical United Brethren came together, and they formed the United Methodist Church.
Oh, okay.
So, you know the history of denominations. There's just splits, and they come back, and they redefine, and that kind of thing. So the United Methodist Church has been around since 1969, and has as a denomination. Yeah. 69. Yeah.
Really quickly, between those who have an affinity for one or the other, is there love or is there animus?
Between those groups? I think there's goodwill.
Is there? Good.
Yeah, there's goodwill. There's not a lot of fighting and throwing of stones. Those groups, they kind of function in their own way and have their own groups. And I think, if I can make a general observation, I think the Wesleyan Methodist Church, which is now the Wesleyan Church because they merged with the Pilgrim Holiness Church in the late 60s, and they became the Wesleyan Church. The Wesleyan Church and the Free Methodist Church, they would probably tend to be a little more evangelical generally than the United Methodist Church. So there'd be some probably more conservative doctrine in the Free Methodists and the Wesleyan Methodists.
Got it.
Yeah, and in the United Methodist Church, you know.
And that's
soup to nuts.
Soup to nuts, huh?
Yep.
Wow.
I could talk about that all day, but
yeah.
We don't have
the
all
greatest
day.
threat, do you think, right now? I mean, just to throw it out there, to the United Methodist Church?
You know, I'll tell you, the greatest threat right now probably focuses on the diversity of opinion about our social issues. In our book of discipline, we have 65 stated positions on social issues. And social issues are a huge part of the focus of the United Methodist Church. In fact, and that grows out of the history of Methodism and John Wesley, because he was so involved in bringing and working towards social change. So if you talk about social change and social issues, even though we're a couple hundred years later, that goes right back to John Wesley. That's why he got out of the Church of England. The churches were empty. Nobody was going to church, kind of like what we're getting to today in some ways.
Yeah.
It's revisited today. But so here's John Wesley, and he realized that the power of faith and the power of, you know, having a strong spiritual grounding, but people were moving away from it. So he got out of the churches and went everywhere he could. Factories, schools, orphanages, you name it. Bars, he'd preach in bars.
Good man.
But the point is that tradition is carried into the United Methodist legacy. We have a book of discipline that has these stated social principles in them, and they're very important to who we are. And if one thing United Methodists believe commonly is that our social issues are important, and they can be changed, and there's a long process to change them, and they can only be changed at what we call the General Conference, and that meets every 4 years.
Okay.
It's a big deal. And right now, we are in this huge debate about the issue of sexuality. There's other really hot button issues. One is immigration, okay?
Whoa.
Immigration, of course, being in the conference I'm from in Arizona, that's a really alive, okay?
That is hot now.
That's a hard, difficult issue in Arizona. And of course, then there's the sexuality issue, which is a very important issue. But there's also other issues like abortion and capital punishment and environment, and those are all a part of what we talk about a lot in our church. sexuality issue is the biggest issue of all.
Now, when you say sexuality, what do you mean?
I'm talking about heterosexual versus homosexual lifestyle.
Okay.
It's about lifestyle. And it also involves our discipline, because our discipline states, and this is where a lot of the focus of the controversy is, because our discipline states that if I'm a open, practicing homosexual, I cannot be ordained to be a clergy person in the United Methodist Church. That's what it says now. And it also says that I, as a United Methodist ordained clergy, cannot do a wedding ceremony for a gay person or two gay people who want to get married. So the huge debate right now, and the thrust, is that we want to change the discipline. And I personally really am in favor of changing the discipline. I think it ought to be opened up. And these are things that have been there a long time. We were debating this in our United Methodist Church in the early 70s. Every year we fight about it at our conferences. It comes up as a huge issue, and it's a sensitive issue. I mean, I have my own beliefs about it, and other United Methodists will have their own beliefs about it, but it's come to such a fever pitch right now in the United Methodist Church that it really does have the capacity to splinter our denomination.
Wow.
And there's a commission that's been working on this issue now for a couple of years called the Commission on the Way Forward, and they are presenting at a special general conference in early 19, a few months from now actually, the results of their work and what they're going to recommend to the next general conference. Because the next that's the only place the discipline can be changed, is at a general conference.
Is it by vote?
It is by vote. It is by vote. And if you went to my conference and took a vote from the conference, they would vote overwhelmingly to change the discipline. It wouldn't be 100%, but you get a majority vote. But as you move into Methodism around the country, the further east you go, the more conservative it becomes. So you'll have whole conferences voting against it, except, you know, conferences send representatives. It's voted on by the representatives that come to the general conference. So conferences are very careful about who they nominate to go. You want them to represent the political, and it is a political issue. It is highly political, as well as in many people's minds highly doctrinal. Okay.
Very much so.
But then Shawn, you get out of the United States and you go to the rest of the world where United Methodism is, and you get to Africa and Asia and many other places, and it's overwhelmingly conservative on this issue. And they have representation too at General Conference. So when all this comes up for a vote, you can see what's going to happen. It's probably any proposed changes may well just get voted down. Unless they find a way to work a compromise. So the Commission on the Way Forward is trying to find a way to compromise on this issue and basically say, listen, it's time we move ahead in our thinking about this whole dynamic of human personality and sexuality. It's time that we truly recognize sexuality as a very personal preference and a personal issue. And I agree with our bishop on this issue. And he'll talk a lot about the fact that we need to be focusing on mission and ministry and not let this continue to be a distraction, because this could lead to the split of the church. You might have the whole middle part staying together, but the real progressives on the left will leave. And the really ultra-conservative on the right, they'll leave because they'll feel like they didn't get what they wanted. Does this make sense?
It'll be a 3-for-1 split.
Exactly. And I think we'll probably lose people over this.
In the world of Protestant Christianity, then, it sounds like Methodism in general, United Methodists, are considered more liberally minded than maybe the Presbyterians. Could we say that in general?
If you compare us for example, to the Presbyterian Church USA, we're pretty much in the same approach. But there are conservative Presbyterian
Yes.
groups that broke off of the main group
Yeah.
that decided to go much more conservative on these issues. And I have good friends that are a part of those groups and have worked with them and so forth, and they just have a different view on this.
Yeah.
And they ultimately appeal to Scripture to
Yeah.
present their point of view.
Within the United Methodist, it sounds like, from what I'm hearing from you and talking to you a little bit, that it's a little bit more cerebral in addition to the biblical. It's not just the Bible says this, you know. It sounds like you guys look at science and research, and you say we got to get progressive a little bit with it.
Yeah, you're very perceptive. And in fact, John Wesley, it actually wasn't Wesley, it was a guy named Albert Outler who developed this out of Wesley's theology. And I'll see if I can get all four of these, okay? You have your history, okay? And you need to learn from your history, okay? You have the Bible, which is central. You need to learn from the Bible.
Okay.
You need logic. You have to be able to look at things and think about them logically. Wesley was very strong into logic as well as faith. And then the fourth one had to do with personal experience. You have to filter in because he was a pretty good sociologist. Everybody grows up in a different way depending on who they are and where they're at. And so you've got he's got these four dynamics. And so he had a very strong practical theology. He would bring together all of these things.
Wow.
Yeah,
I like
and
that.
that's one thing I appreciate about our tradition.
Yeah.
Is that, and actually to say it more accurately, Shawn, he really believed that it's like a tripod. You've got the base of the tripod. Like if you look at the cameras around us, the base of the tripod is the Bible. That's the foundational part. And then you've got history and experience and reason as the three legs.
Wow.
And I often keep that in mind when I'm writing sermons.
Wonderful. And to you guys at home, many of you are still looking for a church, especially in this state, after you leave Mormonism or whatever. And so now you're hearing, this is sort of a non-pitch pitch, that you're hearing what goes behind the thinking, at least in United Methodist Church. So you're in college.
Yes.
And then afterward?
And I never really got out. It was Michigan State after all. Well, I got out and then I went to seminary and then got married near the very end of my seminary time. And I've been married 2 times. And obviously my second wife is with me here in the studio. And her name's Deb, and she had 2 kids in her first marriage, and I had 2 in mine, and we've had 4 together, so we have a total of 8 children and 11 grandchildren.
Wow. And
but after, to kind of fill in the time there a little bit, I actually came back to Arizona. Well, I'd served in Arizona for 5 years, and I went back to Michigan State and got my PhD in higher education and lifelong learning and adult learning, because I was really interested, as I shared with you, about faith development and how adults continue to process and learn and grow in their faith. And it was a really great program and a great time doing that. And then we came back to Arizona, and I worked at a church, a United Methodist Church in downtown Mesa, Arizona, and I was actually really in charge of adult education. And it was an exciting ministry and a good time. And then after that, I became interested in getting a little more skilled in counseling, and I did an internship for a couple of years with a place called Interfaith Counseling Service, and became a part of the American Association of Pastoral Counselors. And then when I was done with that experience, serendipitously I found my way into the ministry with Native Americans. One of the therapists I work with said, you know, I work for this small college, and have been doing some stuff with them, and they're looking for a chaplain. And I said, well, tell me about that. And so she described the college and the fact that it's a Native American college, and there's Native Americans who come from all over the country with their families, and they settle there, and it's really a program where Native men and women are trained to do ministry back on the reservations. And these folks were coming from Canada and New York.
Any tribe.
Any tribe.
Wow.
And there's 586 federally recognized tribes. So there's a big well there to draw people from. And that proved to be just a huge growth time for me personally, because I went on, I did take the job as chaplain, and as I had shared with you, I thought, oh, I'll just spend a year here. It's a good year to transition to when I grow up and find out what I really want to do. And ended up staying there for 25 years. Eventually became president of the college. And it's a small college. It's a Native American college that really focused on trying to work very carefully with Native families. Native people don't like to come off the reservations if that's where they have grown up. And that's their home. That is their home. And so as I began to learn about their culture, and it's just not the Native American culture, it's the culture of the Navajo, the culture of the Dakota, the culture of the Nez Perce, the culture of, and it's not the culture of the Dakota, it's the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota.
Wow.
The three different groups within that group. And so I had to learn to shut my mouth and truly listen and learn. And it took, I think, a long time to really earn and build the trust of Native people. And I remained friends with so many of those people even to today. I left there about
Asked you what you generally could
and their pain, because Native Americans were so destroyed by the European invasion, and it really was an invasion that didn't give a rip about the inhabitants of this country. And so Native Americans were, their culture was taken from them, their languages were taken from them. I can tell you horror stories from people that would work in our college from all over the country that had been raised in boarding schools, and how they would have their hands beaten by rulers if they would speak their own language. Their culture was taken away from them, stripped from them, and this was a common practice. I mean, Native Americans were the only active group in this United States where active genocide was practiced.
Wow.
The Trail of Tears, thousands died. The viruses put in blankets, smallpox, on purpose to infect Native Americans, and they would die. Wholesale murder and villages. This went on a great deal. Wow. At one point in time, the number of Native Americans got as low as 200,000 in what we would think of as the United States.
Started at?
Well, there were millions when it started.
Amazing.
The diseases that we imported from Europe just decimated native people. Wow. And one of the great tragedies, somebody has said that Christianity, it's a historian, Christianity, when it comes to Native American people, was the greatest missionary failure in the history since day one of the faith. And I really do agree with that after working within that and studying that for many years.
That's something to really consider.
It really is. Yeah. And you had the army, and you had the church and the missionaries all walking hand in hand. And that's not to say there weren't missionaries who were not concerned about Native people. They were, but they were carrying out the bigger agenda, which was not to help Native people be independent. In the earlier times anyway, it was really to acculturate Native Americans, make them nice little Europeans.
Oh, guy.
It's a really awful history if you learn it accurately.
In that woundedness, is there a lot of anger then?
A lot of anger. A lot of anger. And you don't have to scratch deep to find that anger. I became close to a lot of Native American people, and they would share still about the anger and even the rage they feel about how their culture was taken away. I had interesting encounters in the classroom, especially in the beginning, where I had made certain assumptions. And I thought I was pretty perceptive, but I'd made certain assumptions about their culture and about Native people. And trying to bring, for example, Western psychotherapy into the understanding of Native American culture. I thought I could do pretty well with that. And as I shared with you about the one student that stood up in class one day and raised his hand and he said, I don't remember what he called me, maybe just Larry, but he said, Larry, he said, you don't know what the heck you're talking about. He said it stronger than that. I told you the more stronger version of that at dinner.
So with that difficulty of, for instance, bringing in, our psychobabble, whatever, into the Native Americans, then can we say the same thing about bringing our Christianity into their spiritual life? Is it difficult?
It's that's a really good question, and because when I got to the college, I learned that there were certain denominations, more conservative denominations. I'd call them almost fundamentalist denominations that believed that it was their job to go out and convert Native people, and you could not let any Native culture be a part of that. In other words, in their mind, they split Western Christianity completely from another person's cultural experience. Not realizing that what they were bringing was their own cultural version of Christianity.
Exactly.
See what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And that never dawned on them, it seems like.
It doesn't dawn on them. It doesn't dawn on us.
We deal with that issue a lot ourselves.
That's right.
In other contexts.
Yeah.
So I think the answer to your question is really interesting. At the college, we welcomed the Native tribes to bring their practices. So we would have them. We welcomed dance. We welcomed the pipe. Okay. We welcomed their rituals. Okay. As part of our worship services. When
you say the pipe, do you mean just the pipe, or is that peyote? I mean, do you mean anything like that's part of their culture?
When I would say the pipe, it would mean the peace pipe as a symbol of wholeness and inclusivity. And quite honestly, everybody in the group would smoke the pipe. All right. And we did have some of our students who were part of the peyote cult, and they would, and that's a religion unto itself. And they were involved in that. We didn't really encourage that.
I see.
Yeah, that got us into more issues than not. Yeah,
well, it can be very dangerous.
You're right.
The thing that's interesting to me is I think you know this about us, Larry, is that we preach a subjective faith. We preach it's between you and God, and whatever you're bringing to the table with that, whatever you decide is there. I mean, it's so liberal. But that's really what you're also saying, is that you allowed them to bring in their culture, and you said, bring what you have. And that is so anathema to the mindset of the typical American evangelical.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
They may say bring it in, but they don't really practice that in reality. Exactly.
So springboarding off that, can I ask, are you dogmatic about anything?
I'm dogmatic about diversity and inclusivity.
Wow.
And really, I am.
Yeah.
And I think my wife would agree with me on that.
Yeah.
Because I really do believe in diversity and inclusivity, and I think John Wesley, given his own cultural limitations, was really that way. But more than that, I think our Lord and Savior was that way.
Yeah, I think so.
You know,
Yeah.
I think he reached out, and the barriers dropped around him.
Yeah.
And it was our Lord who was embraced inclusivity of every kind. And you know, Wesley's strong. I think I'm dogmatic about grace.
Okay.
Grace,
Yeah.
because I really do believe that God loves everyone
Yeah.
unconditionally,
Yeah.
and that, you know, we have to certainly make judgments at times about behavior, because the behavior has to be held accountable.
Sure.
But I think the grace of God goes to everyone equally, and without you know, judgment. I really believe that.
That's beautiful, and I agree. Yeah.
Having said that,
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm in a denomination that's really fairly structured.
Yeah.
And I think I live with this tension all the time between being ordained in a denomination that's hierarchical, begin with a bishop and you work your way down, and it's very, very, very structured. That empowers us with good things, and it also sometimes can become a roadblock. And I think navigating through that kind of terrain has been one of the challenges of being a clergy in the United Methodist Church. It's certainly not all perfect, but it's not all bad either. There's good things.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me that with all your experience, starting as a young kid, traveling and seeing different cultural life as a child, that really affects somebody. And then your education level, and then the experience with the Native Americans, that you still are willing to exist in a hierarchical structure of religion.
Yeah.
That amazes me to some extent.
And the only reason I think I can do that is because in reality, beyond that structure, in the local church, local United Methodist Church, the pastor can exercise great influence in how that church is going to run.
Oh.
You have a lot to say about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You don't have complete reign,
Yeah.
but you do have a lot of flexibility to do the kind of ministry you want to do.
Yeah, and that's good. And the benefits of it, you know, I don't talk much about the benefits, but there are. I know there are.
I won't push you on that.
Thank you.
Shawn,
Thank
okay?
you for your grace. Okay, so there is one thing before we get to the family. How are we doing on time? Is that 40 minutes? Man, I could talk to Dr. Reverend Pastor Larry for hours. One thing I want to pitch to you, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. From a biblical perspective, Adam and Eve were married in the fact that Eve was taken from his side, and we don't have any ceremony go on there at all.
Yeah.
But pastors imply that we do, that God married them, but they were one, right? And it seems like from the biblical model, when Sarah told Abraham, take Hagar, a pastor didn't come down and marry them, that he went into the tent and he had relations with
Right,
them.
Exactly.
If the
They
marriage...
were known, the word is known.
Known, right.
The Hebrew
They
word,
knew
yeah,
each other.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right.
And it's the two becoming one and all that. And so it seems like biologically and biblically, that is our definition of marriage, is that when the two become one.
Yes. Yeah.
So the way I approach this, and I really want to hear your honest response to this, is that when it comes to same-sex marriage, I say, get married. But from a biblical Christian perspective, it's impossible for me to marry you because the marriage is in the union of the two becoming one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just want to hear your thoughts about that approach to this from the campus perspective.
I've never thought of it quite that way, but I understand exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
So many of our, so much of our understanding about marriage is it's our rules.
Yeah.
We've made the rules.
Yeah.
Okay, they've been developed going back literally to the times of the Romans and even earlier. I mean, our own understanding of marriage and how we do it. And again, people don't often realize that, sociologically here, there's a whole framework that we just take in and breathe like it's normal and natural. It's not normal and natural because people do this stuff differently all over the world from the tribal level on up.
Yes.
And so I understand what you're saying. I don't really have an issue with that.
Okay.
I don't. No, fundamentally I do not. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I never thought of it quite that way, but
Okay.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay, good. That means
Yeah.
something. And it's not that I wouldn't say a couple who is gay are here. I would say they're married. We have couples who support our ministry who
Yes,
are married.
yes.
They're civilly married, and that's fine with me.
Yeah.
Fine.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And in the last church I served, not the one I'm in now, but we had many gay couples, and same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And many were just together as partners, living together. They've been together a long time. Many had a civil ceremony. Many were married.
Yeah.
Some were married. Exactly.
Yeah.
Officially, they've gone to do that.
Thanks for that feedback. So you and your lovely wife Deb, you do a Brady Bunch, and you've got 47 kids between you. You've got 8. You and your wife is similar to you in education, worldview. It seems like liberal. I'm just going to say it. You guys are more liberal. You had a son come to you. He's been raised in the church, and this is where it gets interesting, folks. He says, I have a bunch of LDS friends. I'm going to join the church. And then he goes on and he says, I'm going to serve a mission for the Mormon church. And you and your wife gave him your blessing.
Yes, we did.
Can you tell us about that for the benefit of other parents whose children leave Christianity, join the Mormon church, typically because of a girl, a guy, or friends, and their fears, I get the calls, they just freak out. So what can we pass on to them from you?
I don't know if it'll help or hurt. Okay. Agree probably with us for that. Maybe
Not
some
me.
will believe that we should have told them, but so the long and the short of it is Junior became more and more interested and finally we talked with him, and he came to us and said, I'd really like to join. And I took a deep breath, and you feel led by this. If you feel led in your own self, then you need to continue with your own sense of direction.
Wow.
And so we did walk the journey with him and went to a lot of his activities. We went to his baptism, as well as a good number of his family who were there with him. And we made many good friends in the Mormon church. And they're still friends with us today. And then eventually came to the training center and studied language for a few weeks, and then he set off on his mission to Argentina.
Wow.
So that's the first part of the story. I hope I didn't leave things out there.
The first part of the story, I because of what we do in the ministry in this state and have dealt with literally, thousands and thousands and thousands of Mormon parents. And I just cannot applaud you and Deb enough for your approach. Because it gave him the freedom, and even if Larry was still LDS and active and he lived till his dying day in that way, you gave him the freedom to make that decision, pursue it, and you loved him. You loved it.
Yeah.
Some don't.
Whatever he would choose, we would love him. And whatever lifestyle he would choose, we would love him.
Yeah.
Because of who he is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
He's 21, 22, thank you. I have never heard him swear one time in his life.
Yeah.
That's an honest statement.
I don't
ask them if they've heard me swear.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
It is.
I've been out as a pastor with Larry and had a drink, and he didn't drink. So this guy blows my mind in terms of his unique individualism.
Yeah.
That is something I'm astounded by with Larry.
Well, you're right, and that's one of the things I've learned about him that I think I came to understand was how independent and individual he really is in his thinking. And I can remember now looking back and seeing him go off in directions that, well, boy, I don't think I'd ever do that, for one reason or another. But yeah, he's a very independent thinker. And
with that independent mind, tell the rest of the story. Larry went out on the mission. And then the light came on for him.
He did. He went out of the mission, and he went to Argentina. And I think maybe even a little bit before he went, he was beginning to have some serious doubts about some of the beliefs of the Mormon Church. And I think a lot of these doubts centered around Joseph Smith and some of the related teachings of the church and doctrine and covenants. And he began to question those, and of course he can articulate that far better than I can. And he also, I have to say, was reading a lot of the stuff from a guy named Shawn McCraney.
Poor guy.
Okay. And this was going to have a huge influence on him. And let me just say it now so I don't forget it, is that you've had an unbelievable influence on him. And one of the reasons he moved here, Shawn, was to get to know you. He came up on his own. He wanted to meet you. He wanted to talk to you. He wanted to know about your ministry, and he's still here. And here we are sitting here right now and having this conversation. But you have been a huge factor and influence in his life, and so has your family.
It's been a blessing to us.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you.
Absolutely. So what happened was he got in Argentina, and he began to seriously question his decision, I think, to become a Mormon. And as I look back, all of this happened so quickly. I don't know if he really ever had a chance to take all of this in and process it and come to the conclusion that he finally came to as he was heading into the South America. So as I understand the story, and is that he got there, and we had a couple conversations with him on the phone, and he said, I really wanted to do mission work. I'm a missionary. I wanted to do mission work, but all I'm doing is expected to go out and convert people and, add up the totals kind of a thing. And he said, that's not really what I'm interested in. And then he began to have some doubts about Mormon theology and belief. And I know he had an experience with one of the was it a bishop, Larry? Bishop down there?
Mission president.
Mission president, okay. And he went to him and said he was having some struggles with some of the beliefs, and he was encouraged by the mission president to go back and pray for a week, and everything would clear up and everything would be fine. So Larry goes away and he prays for a week and comes back in a week, and he said, I'm really not feeling it, and this isn't going to work for me. And so he was challenged by the mission president in a somewhat of a derogatory way. He said, do you think you're better than the prophet? And I think Larry may have came close to swearing then. I don't know. But anyway,
that's a standard MO.
He said, I don't think I should stay.
Wow.
Yeah. And so Larry got in touch with us, and they finally made a decision down there. Yeah, you really do need to go back because you're not quite in sync with the program.
Yeah.
And so he came back, and he came back, and he'd probably have to tell about how he felt about all of that exactly.
Yeah. How did you feel about him coming back? Was there any sense of relief?
It's interesting. I had a couple, if I'm honest, I had a couple different reactions. One was relief. One was relief because I was feeling, and I think certainly Deb was feeling, we're glad that you rethought this and made a decision not to continue into this journey. Because even though I personally didn't agree with what he was learning, and I didn't agree with the Mormon Church, he had followed his own heart. He had made a decision, and so the downside of it was for me is you can't fulfill kind of what you decided you were going to do for 2 years.
Yeah.
But in the end, that feeling was here, and the other feeling was here, so they weren't comparable in any way. And so then he has come back, and I've just seen him grow and develop in so many ways. And I will say one thing. He was not particularly interested in religion or the Bible until his friends began to show him about Mormonism. And it's through the back door or the basement door or whatever, but he found his way into learning about the Bible and about religion through Mormonism.
Wow.
Even though he didn't come out to where they stand in their beliefs, he has grown by leaps and bounds.
God does work in mysterious ways.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That is really wonderful. We have an audience. You may know, Dr. Norris, that a lot of them have been burned by religion. A lot of them, it doesn't not necessarily Mormonism. They teeter on atheism.
That all the different religions and different ways of thinking about God, he said the least creative that offers nothing is atheism.
And
so,
wasn't he an atheist though?
No.
He was an.
Was
active
he
Jew?
an atheist?
I thought he was but maybe I'm wrong. He just passed, right?
He just passed.
Yeah, I thought. Well, I could be wrong on that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, but that's interesting that he would even say that.
Yeah. It is. It is.
Wow.
So what I would say is don't give up. Do not give up. Continue to search and find a place where you can live out what you feel and believe in terms of your heart. Your show here is called Matter of the Heart, and I think the heart is a huge part of what people need to follow.
Yeah.
I think there is as many wacko religious, groups in what I would call fundamentalism as there are in the other side of liberalism. I would say seek a church, find a church, and there's lots of different churches that give different expressions to how you live your faith and how they understand dogma, but keep searching, keep looking, and find something ultimately that I believe reflects who Jesus Christ is, who reflects Christ. If you want to know who God is, look at Jesus Christ and find something that works for you then. And there's no magic recipe, but that's certainly what I would encourage. Be true to yourself, be true to what you believe, keep searching.
Can't thank you enough. You've inspired me and taught me many things sitting here, and grateful for you and Deb and the son. All the children you've raised, don't know them, but I do know Larry, and he's a blessing to the ministry, and he's someone who is authentic, and you can't beat that, and I love it. So thank you so much.
Shawn, thank you.
All right.
Thank you for this opportunity to sit with you. I've appreciated this very much.
Thank you
very much. Thank you for your ministry and for your family.
Thank you for yours.
Thank you.